This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides. So head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more. Welcome to Grow Cook Eat Arrange, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven, and various different guests and friends and members of our team at Sarah Raven. Today, I'm joined by Tom Stimpson, who's our head of horticulture. And Tom and I work a lot together, designing, putting together collections of tulips, dahlias, We go travelling a lot to the Netherlands and around nurseries in this country. And we're very like-minded. So I guess that's a sort of brief introduction to Tom. Hello, Tom.
Hi, Sarah. How you doing?
Very nice to see you and to hear you. So, what we thought through the winter, which is a time that you stand back a bit from your garden and you're not needing to garden quite so much, is it's a time to reassess things. And so we thought a step back, we would do a series of the 12 best plants for ... So all the way through with Tom in some of them, and with Josie Lewis, our head gardener, in some of them, and with Arthur Parkinson, who's my initial co-host from when we started 4 years ago, in some of them, and with some of them, just me on my own. It would be our stepping back and our assessment of the things that we've learnt over the years that we've been gardening are the really outstanding stellar plants. And so it's sort of what I think of as a sort of stock cube, whether you're a beginner gardener or a more seasoned gardener and you want a bit of zhuzh and new ideas to go into your garden, it hopefully will give you that. And what we thought we would start with are the structural plants. So if you're setting out and designing a new garden, or, as I say, kind of looking at your garden through really un-rosy tinted spectacles, has it got good structure and is there a way of improving it? So we thought we would start with that as the bones that you then hang the rest of your garden onto. And so we're going to do 6 of our favourite structural plants for year-round beauty as our first episode in this new series. It's going to run all the way through until next spring. And so I hope you'll join us for the ride. And I'm going to kick off with asking Tom to say his favourite number one. Well, maybe there's no particular order, but your favourite structural plant for a smaller scale garden. So, Tom.
Okay, well, I think I'm going to kick off with hydrangea paniculata. My 2 favourites are Limelight and Little Fresco, just because, yes, it's my garden's a town garden in the middle of Ely in Cambridgeshire, and both of these varieties are perfect for pots.
Yes.
Which is how I grow them. And I've got several, about 4 or 5 of them scattered about. And for me, this is just lovely because I love the emerging spring foliage in the spring, blossoms out into that lovely deep green colour. Then we have the flowers that then are through summer and into autumn. And then as they start to change, that's one of my favourite bits about growing hydrangeas is that when the flowers start to change and take on that wonderful blush colour in the autumn.
Yeah.
I love to pick a few for that and to dry to carry through into the winter. And then even when the flowers have sort of gone quite brown and crisp, I'm looking at them now as I look out the window, that they're lovely. So for me, there's interest for 12 months.
Yeah.
And then with the paniculata types, obviously you can cut them back because they flower on new wood. So then you get all the fresh growth again because they're so fast to grow. So number one plant for me, really good value.
And so just back to varieties. So the hydrangea paniculata, so is it Limelight? Is that not too big for pots? Is it Little Lime or it's just a straightforward Limelight?
Yes, just
Yeah,
limelight.
yeah.
And I find, I mean, I suppose the terracotta pot's 40 centimeters high by maybe 40 by 40. And I mean, what I've done in the past is I take them out of the pot and give them a little root trim,
Yeah.
and then just put them back with some fresh compost.
Okay.
They work really well for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, really good.
And I love Tom's garden. It's an absolute jewel box. It really, truly is. And he has one area that runs down the side of a path that's public between him and several of his neighbours. And it's quite shady, this particular bed, which Tom has sort of almost guerrilla gardened in the... do you own it, Tom, or did you just take it over and start gardening it?
We do own it.
You do
yes,
own it.
we
Okay.
do.
Anyway, and on the corner of that, he's got these rather nice sort of concrete tiles that look like they're stone in the bed, which is a shady bed. It's really shady. And he's got different hydrangeas 3 or 4 times down this bed. So this bed's probably about 30 foot long, something like that. Sort of.
Yep.
And you've got both the paniculatus and you've got little fresco right on the corner there, haven't you?
Yes. Which is one of my favourites. I think that's one of the best for the colour. That's lovely blushed sort of pink colour in the autumn.
Yeah.
I'm very fond of that.
Yeah, good. Okay, so my starting off plant is something that I have mentioned a bit, but I just feel I haven't gone on about quite enough for how good it is. And every year it just blows my socks off. And it's a very widely available, some would say communal garden plant that as you drive through the village, if I draw attention to it, or the town where you live or the city, you'll see it appearing in so many front gardens. And it's Abelia grandiflora. And Josie Lewis gave it to me. It outgrew her garden. And so she bought it here and we've got it on our doorstep. And I'm really obsessed by it. And I tell you why, kind of 4 or 5 reasons. The first is it is deciduous, but it holds its leaves very late in the year, if not almost all winter. And that will slightly depend. But I mean, like now we're in November and it is still completely covered in flower and leaf. And it's got this wonderful sort of soft peachy hue going to a sort of coppery bronze, almost like Amelanchier in spring. And so it looks fresh as a daisy. And we are going into, it's been a very mild autumn. And so we haven't yet had any really cold frosts or anything. But it looks honestly like it could be spring. And for me, that is such an asset to have something that looks so fresh so late in the year. So we've actually trialled a new, smaller variety, which is suitable for pots. But Abelia grandiflora, which is a straight, widely available variety, absolutely splendid for its length of beauty. But not just that, it is absolutely covered from May until November with very lovely, gently, it's not powerfully scented, but perfumed flowers. And what that draws in is a ton of pollinators. So it's covered in bees. So much so, one of our dogs, Dusty, is petrified of bees because she got stung by a bee when she was a puppy. She's a Labradoodle and she's got very, very light, fine hair for a dog. And I think this bee just sort of got into her coat and then stung her several times because it couldn't get out. And so she's petrified of bees. And so she won't go out that door because that particular shrub, it just goes bzzz for 6 months of the year. And if she hears bzzz, she goes and hides under the sofa. So Abelia grandiflora. And this autumn has had loads of hummingbird hawk moths, which is just such a lovely pollinator. Which has come over from the continent, but it's wonderful. Anyway, so it's scented, it cuts brilliantly. If you sear the stem ends in boiling water, it lasts 2 weeks in the vase. It looks wonderful for a really long period of time. If you don't have it, and if you've got a little chink in your garden, it's a shrub that I passionately recommend. I think we should all have it. I really do. And for structure, because it's so good for so long, it would be my number one. If I was laying out a new garden for one of my children and they wanted recommendations, that's how I think of it, is what would I tell my kids to grow if they just were starting with a new build? And it would be Abelia grandiflora would be my number one. And I would totally agree with Tom. Some of the hydrangea paniculatus would definitely be my number 2. So over to you, Tom.
Okay. And just, I love that Abelia too, outside of the door.
Yeah.
Every time I come to Perch Hill, I love to see it. It's so beautiful. I think my number 2, I'm going to go with the acer, actually,
Oh,
Acer
good.
palmatum. And I've had a acer. I've got a couple, but this particular one I've had in a large pot. It's gone up in pot size a couple of times, but for over 15 years. And this one
Wow.
is quite a common variety. It's Oza Kazuki, and it has it's such a. I mean, I think when you buy them, it's important to get the multi-layered stems right to begin with.
Yes.
So you've got instant shape that then will grow and continue to form that beauty. But I love the stem color, and it's all about the leaves. So in
Yeah.
spring, as they emerge to that beautiful soft green, and
Yeah.
then gradually over the summer,
Mm.
lovely
Bronzy,
large maple
coppery.
shaped leaves.
Yeah.
Yeah, and by the time we get to autumn, it's starting to change into a lovely orange. And there's just a few leaves left on it still. It's the most gorgeous red. And this year seems to have been absolutely the strongest red I think I've ever known it be, really. It's quite striking.
It's funny, isn't it, that a mast year does seem to coincide. You know, a mast year, which I'm sure you all know, is a very high fruiting year. So whether it's beech mast or, what are they called? I've completely forgotten what oak things are called, like my necklace that I'm wearing. What are they called?
Oh,
Acorns. I hate
Acorns.
acorns. I had a mind freeze there. And then we had the best damsons, But I wonder if that coincides scientifically in plant physiology with particularly good autumn colour. Because I agree with you, our woods, I mean, I know it's because it's been mild and not so wet actually yet. But going in the woods, the oaks are still covered in leaves now. And so I don't know, but that's interesting, isn't it? Because I agree. I think our autumn colour of our shrubs and things through the garden have been better this year than I can remember.
It's really beautiful. I really love that tree. And I think then because it sits at the sort of top corner, and then as we get towards the middle of November, obviously the stems can look a little bit bare. So then I cover them with fairy lights.
Yes.
And then it's sort of lit up then through as we lead up to Christmas. And then I think you need some sparkle in January somehow to lift the mood. So until the leaves start to emerge again in the spring.
That's
so
such a nice idea.
All gardens should have acers, definitely.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree more, having actually, to be honest, had a slight sort of prejudice against them because of that sort of garden makeover thing when I was growing up, where the acer was the sort of standard plant that would be imported to a brand new garden to give it the feeling of maturity. So I had a wrong bias against them, prejudice against them. And I've had to really reconsider that. And that's because of your garden, Tom, because you actually have two, one as you come out your back door and then one down the end of the path, looking from where you sit at your desk. And both of them are so beautiful for such a long period of time. And I've really had to reconsider them. And then, funnily enough, I came back having spent time in your garden and suddenly spotted that Josie had snuck one in a place I hadn't noticed. And I was so happy. And I said to her, "Oh, let's dig it up and put it in a pot." She said, "No, it's got very well established here. Thank you very much." And it's actually under our Magnolia grandiflora, which of course is massive. And she's just tucked it in. And it even in the shade there, it's very happy. And it's the most beautiful colour. And it's got the most delicate structure to the leaf. And the thing that I think I hadn't quite taken on board is how good it is for a small garden. So your garden is what? Remind me?
It's 10 meters by 7.
Yeah.
So it's tiny.
Yeah. And it's got that and an Amelanchier, which actually neither of us, I think, are planning to talk about. But I mean, that would be the other possibility. And so, small garden trees or shrubs are so important for this structural element, this upper story, to give you a silhouette and to think about the overall shape. How I remember I was taught once by my godmother, who was a garden designer. She said, "Sarah, think about your garden in a black and white photograph, or even take a picture of your garden in black and white and look at the structure of it before you put in any colour. And as a colour addict, I was quite resistant to her advice, to be honest. But over the years, I have really consciously added an upper story and added small trees all the way through, because I was all about production, and I was only kind of I'm more a botanist, I think, in the way I garden. So I look down at detail rather than up at vista. But I do think you need both for a successful garden. And I do think that these structural plants that give you a silhouette and a structure are really important.
And height.
And height, absolutely.
Because I think, if I were fortunate to have a much bigger space, then I'd love a garden that, you couldn't see from one area.
Yeah.
Well, my garden, I can see it all in one goes, but having the height, especially in the summertime when it's full of foliage, just creates and makes it look a little bit grander than it probably necessarily is. So, I think height's important.
Yeah, it gives a sense of sort of privacy and secrecy, and even in your small space, it gives a sense of division, doesn't it?
Yes.
So my next plant is very much related to this, which is Crataegus prunifolia. And it's a hawthorn with really big haws or berries. And we have two actually in the Dutch yard. And a friend recommended them to me, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years ago. And I actually bought them as quite sizable plants, bare root, from a tree nursery. And they gave the Dutch yard immediately exactly what we're talking about, this silhouette, this structure, this overall upper story. And I have really fallen in love with those trees. And you always worry about planting things that are quite sizable when they go in. And I was worried about that because it's more expensive and it's high risk because they don't always love it. But those two settled in really quickly. And I look at one immediately to the east. So it's really beautiful, backlit. Out of my bed, I can see it backlit as the sun comes up. And there's another that is outside our bathroom window. And our bath looks straight out the window. And there, again, I see it now in the autumn. And it's still absolutely covered in red leaves and these wonderful big haws. And it's just absolutely splendid. They look as good as a red crabapple. And yet the birds don't eat them so quickly. So they hold on to their fruit or whatever longer. So Crataegus prunifolia, to be honest, that's not its absolutely correct Latin name because it's rather longer than that, but we'll put it in the podcast notes. And I would say as a structural plant for a smaller or bigger garden, it works incredibly well. And it's a really neat, but yet not uptight structure giver. And I'm mad keen on it. And I'm thinking I might this weekend actually try making some hawthorn jelly with some crab apples in it as well.
Oh, that sounds lovely.
For Christmas, we're having partridge, I think. And we've got quite a lot of people. And so I want to make a jelly to go with that as well as bread sauce. And so that's what I was thinking I might turn my hand to this weekend. So multi-purpose, I would say. Good for birds, good for nature because the birds will come to the berries. Good for beauty and good in the kitchen. Well, I'll report back on that. So over to you, Tom.
Well, I'm next. I'm going to go with the dogwood. And well, there's a couple I like, but I like and I haven't yet got this in my garden, but I'd like to have one in my garden, and that's a Cusa type.
Yes.
And I do love Norman Haddon as a particular cultivar, and I think in a big pot, and I think I've got just the space for it, and I love these for their graceful shape.
Yes.
And I think I know as our climate gets a little bit milder and milder, almost not quite, but almost evergreen. Like foliage almost. They just don't seem to lose their leaves quite like they used to. And it's such a rich green colour, lovely shape again with the layered branches that sort of feather from top to bottom, which I think will be perfect in a big terracotta pot just at the end of my kind of terrace area.
What a great idea.
I think that's next on the cards, I think. And I love the way it changes its leaf colour as it sort of goes to a lovely crimson in the autumn. And of course, in the early summer, I love it for its creamy.
Yes, the
creamy
flowers.
that change to that lovely, soft, kind of delicate pink.
Yeah. And it cuts brilliantly. So just
Really? Now that's even better then.
Yeah,
if it does that.
In our little London garden, we had one that we inherited, to be honest. And I remember I was on a shoot and I hadn't bought enough flowers. And so I picked some and seared the stem ends in boiling water. And, I think they lasted about 3 weeks. I had little sprigs along the marble fireplace. And I went away, left them and came back and they were still looking fine. So I agree. I think for a small garden or a big garden, but I mean, I think it's another fantastic tree come shrub for a smaller area. And that's a nudge to me. I think I might put some on the east facing bank here.
Yes, I think that's going to be, and it's the hanging fruit. I love those hanging fruits. I think it's just got so much seasonal interest. And I'm pretty confident it's going to be good in a pot. I feel pretty okay about that.
Yeah.
I think it's going to work.
Exciting. Well, I mean, it certainly has done well in this London garden where it's in dappled shade, actually, from a maple. So that's funny that we've talked about those two. And it's not in a pot, but it's in quite a horrible bit of ground, to be honest. So I reckon it would be all right in a pot. So my next one would be a hardy olive. And I am a bit of a Helenophile. I am a complete Greek junkie. To be honest, because I absolutely love spring there because of the wildflowers and lots of the things that I grow in the garden here I see just on a walk across the hillsides in Crete. I don't know, like the anemones and things. But to give me a touch of Greece when I'm not in Greece or the Mediterranean, I planted an olive here in the farmhouse garden 25 years ago or so, I would say. And I actually then went on in the rose garden and planted 3. And they had come in as sort of decent size. I think they were about 7 or 8 years old. And we had them initially, I was thinking that they weren't hardy, and we had them initially in big pots in the greenhouse. And I'd been inspired by this fantastic restaurant in Amsterdam, in the eastern suburbs of Amsterdam, where they have a restaurant called De Kas, which means greenhouse, but I've got a very bad Dutch accent, D-E, new word, K-A-S. Wonderful restaurant in the old palm houses for the Amsterdam parks. Anyway, you would have your lunch or dinner under what was almost like an indoor olive grove. And I just thought it was so romantic. And I actually had my 40th birthday there. So now 22 or 3 years ago. It's a wonderful place. Anyway, I rushed back here and we made our greenhouse here, very much inspired by their greenhouse. And I bought, Adam gave me for Christmas and my birthday, an olive, and we put them in pots. Anyway, they grew too big because we've got this thing called a thermal screen that comes over the greenhouse to keep the frost off and the worst of the heat off. So it's like bubble wrapping it in the winter and then whitewashing it in the summer. So it's called a thermal screen. Anyway, it's at a certain height and the olives wouldn't fit. So we just put them in the garden, took them out of the pots because that always makes things less labour intensive, and just planted them in what was the herb garden. And they are happy as Larry. So I do think olives, I know they can be seen as a bit of a cliche, but I think the bigger they get, the more gnarled. I mean, the one that we have in the farmhouse garden now has the girth of the trunk. I don't know, it's probably 40 centimetres. And I look at that the other way from our bathroom window. So on one side of the bathroom window to the north, I've got Crataegus prunifolia, and to the south, I've got the olive. And I absolutely love them. And of course, what one does realise about an olive is it's evergreen. So it is not deciduous. And so it looks good even in the depths of winter. And do you know what? Chiff-chaffs, these sweet little birds, love them, and they're eating all the little bugs in them. Great tits, blue tits, and even the odd long-tailed tit loves them. So, it's like a bird fest looking out of the bathroom window. And so I think olives are really, really good structural trees. And with climate change, of course, they're not fruiting here, but they're really wonderful for year-round interest.
I think I agree. I don't have any olives at home at the moment, but I would really love one. And I think they're a lot tougher and hardier than people think.
I think so. I
really do think. I think if it's got good drainage, then I think they can cope with the lower temperatures. I really do. I think they're as tough as old boots, really.
Yeah. Good. Your next one?
Well, I'm going to go for something, and I have been thinking about this a little bit, but I'm going to go for a spindle, just Euonymus alatus.
Yes, yeah.
And
They're
for
wonderful.
several reasons. And I mean, I just love the straight Euonymus alatus, but I also there's now a cultivar called compactus, which is just a little bit smaller, so a little bit more controlled, so a bit better for my garden. Again, to put in a pot, everything in my garden is all. I'm always thinking about what I can put in pots, because the pots I can move about and place in different areas as I see fit, really. And I think this particular one, compactus, is a smaller version. I know it's going to look very good in a terracotta pot. And the first reason I love them is for that very distinct corky kind of wing branchlets. I really love those.
Yeah.
They have such a good textural quality to them. And of course, you get the fantastic leaf colour in the autumn, that glowing, bright, glorious red. I just love them. So I feel I wouldn't mind a couple of those just dotted around, and I can just move them around then, because they'll be small enough to do that. And I can have them up close to the house as the leaf colour comes into force in the autumn, or I can just set them aside a little bit maybe in the summer months, or put them outside along the fence just to create a little bit of structure and add some form. I think I'm going to get a couple of these dwarf spindles, sort of compact, to have in pots closer to the house. And literally, I might in a period of in the summer, I might move them to the back of the garden or just outside the fence. But I think then in the autumn, I'm looking out now, and I think it'd be lovely to have that little blast of colour to carry us through leading up to Christmas. So I think are really good little plants they are.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Those incredible pods. I mean, they're just so great. Just a sprig of those is all you need in your little sitting room there, isn't it? So my next one, kind of linked in a way, which is perhaps not a conventional choice, but I'm going to go for a fig. And the thing about figs is that, again, I suppose because I am a Mediterranean addict, I absolutely love that leaf shape, that big undulating leaf shape of a fig. And they don't do anything in the winter, I know, but the leaves come out not, sort of mid to late spring. And then they just give you this really brilliant structural plant, which if you grow in a pot, they actually fruit really well because they need to have their roots restricted. And so we've actually had a fig trial in pots and containers here for 5 years. And I've just been able to start picking figs this summer from these pots. And I mean, brown turkey is a big variety, so it would need a whopper pot, or, you could plant it in the ground. And we've got it actually on the east face of the school here. And I just love it. And I've learnt this new thing, which is fig leaves give you this extraordinary flavour to anything dairy. And so, like, I've been making a rice pudding with fig leaf in it. And I made this incredible, well, Sophie in the school, who's our chef, made this incredible fig leaf ice cream. And it's really wonderful, very subtle flavour. It's sort of a bit coconutty and a little bit nutty. And funnily enough, it really reminded me of almost like that taste of condensed milk. It's quite sort of sweet, but anyway, absolutely wonderful. And so I'm just starting work on a new cookbook, and I'm going to do lots of experiment with fig leaves, as well as, of course, in a hot summer like we had this summer. Wonderful, wonderful figs. But I think for containers, they make really good punctuation plants that you can move around the garden. And in the ground, they will fruit better. But I think as a structural plant against a wall or fence in a town or city garden, as well as in a garden with more space like this, I think a fig is a really wonderful thing. And brown turkey is probably the best for fruiting in this country, I would say.
They're lovely. And I know you can get sort of slightly shorter cultivars now, can't you?
Yeah.
I can't remember all the
I think there
names.
might be one called Miss Figgy or something like that.
Yes. There is, yes, which does kind of retain that nice compact shape for a pot. But
yeah.
I'm with you on figs. I mean, figs are just so delicious, aren't they?
Aren't they? Aren't they?
I adore them. When they're in season, that's the real treat to have those, I think.
Yeah, totally. So your next one?
So I'm going to go with a Mahonia next.
Scent.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, there's a couple here. So I like the traditional types. Yes, with the very bright yellow flowers, and yes, that I have tried picking some of these, and I have tried searing them, but they never last very long. But I love them just put in a little jug, just to
Yeah.
have on the table. It's like a little jug of cheer, really.
Yeah.
I'm very fond of doing things like that.
Yeah.
So I love the traditional ones with the spiky leaves. Very the foliage is great. It gives a lovely architectural kind of presence. But I also like there's a new one out now called Volcano, a different beast altogether. That has more softer feathery foliage, so it's not spiky, but it's a very good sort of central feature for a pot that can then be underplanted for autumn and winter displays, or if you choose to carry on through the summer. But that has a lovely fiery orange flower in the summer, but without
Yes.
all the prickles of the foliage. So
Yes.
I think I'm very tempted to try that next year. I think for something a little bit different.
Yeah, and there are more and more Mahonias now coming out that are container size, but yet not uptight, because that's what you sort of worry when you hear something's been bred to be dwarf, isn't it? That they can get a bit uptight. But no,
You
I
don't want to
agree.
blob.
No, no, you don't want a blob. No,
This
exactly.
does move and has
Yeah,
some movement,
yeah,
which
yeah.
is yeah, I love.
Good. So, linked to scent, obviously Mahonia have the most delicious fragrant flowers, but not for flowers, but for its leaves. I'm crazy about myrtle. And
Oh yes.
just as the normal common or garden myrtle, I think it's a much underused plant in this country. I mean, at Sissinghurst, they had it pruned very tightly on the walls and it was rather elegant. But we actually have 3 of these rose cum herb garden, and they are a damp marker plant in the Mediterranean. So they will take heat and drought, but they like a bit of moisture too, if possible. But what's brilliant about them is that they have this incredibly wonderful fragrance to their leaves. And I've started using that in the kitchen a lot, almost like basil or bay in a tomato sauce. And of course, I mean, they're not completely evergreen, but almost totally. I mean, they seem to drop their leaves really late, if at all, here. They then have these amazing berries. And the reason that I'm so keen on them as a structural plant is the birds, they hold their berries very, very, very late in the year. And it might be that they're not the most delicious berries, or because they're black, then the birds aren't attracted to them. But we found the garden birds were thick in our 3 myrtle bushes right the way into April, which is February, March, and April is the hungry gap for garden birds. So it's really important to have things. I mean, Cotoneaster is the other thing, or Pyracantha. But I'm not so keen on those, whereas myrtle is a sophisticated, beautiful thing, I think. And I mean, I like some of the other 2, but it's definitely my favourite as a structural plant. And what we found is that you can actually thin, rather than pruning hard back, you can actually thin them out. So almost 1 in 3 branches you can cut to the base and you get some air into them, as well as cutting them back a bit as a way of containing them. And yeah, wonderful evergreen or almost evergreen, wonderful berries late in the year, wonderful fragrance, and really fantastic in the kitchen. But a really useful, underutilized plant, I think, in this country.
Great for Christmas as well, Christmas decorations.
Wonderful for Christmas, wonderful for
Wreath
picking.
making, or just
Yeah.
a big bunch, or to pair with some other herbs. Really lovely.
Yeah. So your final one, Tom, for garden structure?
Well, I'm going to go for a witch hazel because I think I like the leaf shape, and I like the way the branches kind of have that lovely arching quality to them.
Yeah.
And you don't just have to go for traditional yellow. There's a whole host of lovely colours sort of in between. So I love them for the leaf in the summer, nice shape, and they just kind of sit very nicely as a nice backdrop to a planting scheme, either a shrub border or along through a perennial border or in a pot. But of course, then from kind of autumn, then through the winter, you get the flowers and the fragrance.
Yes.
And I think for me, for small garden, anything that provides that kind of variety in a pot is just fantastic.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go for witch hazels.
Excellent. Any particular variety, or you're not quite sure yet?
Do you know, I'm not not quite sure. I want a couple, and I think I'm going to sit them outside the gate in pots, and then I'm going to underplant them with narcissi or something like that, I think, to carry through.
So my final one, but I want us to just talk about ilex as well before we wrap up, would be rosemary. And I know it's a really obvious plant, but I just think no garden should be without rosemary. And it's evergreen, it's structural. I love prostratus for a small garden because it sort of spreads and sort of softens the edge of a terrace, or it cascades down in a pot. So it's brilliant. Even if you're a balcony gardener, for me, rosemary prostratus is an absolute must-have plant. Obviously, you can pick it for the kitchen. I mean, we use it a lot with lamb traditionally in this country, but I also love it with pork. I make a pork and rosemary pasta with sesame oil and sesame seeds or pine nuts. And it couldn't be easier. It's my kind of get to the table in 12 minutes type dish. And rosemary, of course, as an evergreen, I can cook that right the way through the winter. It's got wonderful flowers, which are fantastic for pollinators. It loves a south-facing wall, but we have it here growing perfectly happily in our Dutch yard, which is quite shady, so it's very tolerant. So for me, my final must-have structural plant would have to be a rosemary, but particularly prostratus. That leads me on to just finishing this episode with the story about your box, Tom. And we could, in a way, do a whole episode on this, but I really think this is a very good place to just touch on it, which is that Tom's garden and his husband, Colin, really loves their box edging and their box topiary shapes to give a sort of design and a structure to even their small space. And Colin has trained these box balls into the most beautiful pomegranate shapes, so like rounds but with a top knot. And Tom, you take over the story of what sort of happened over the last 3 or 4 years.
Well, we had an attack of the box moth, and obviously the caterpillars. Kind of, it was a bit of a shock when it first happened. It was 3 years ago, and it was only part of the box in the pots, especially the hedging that's planted into the ground seemed to be not quite so affected. But we had about 15 big terracotta pots full of box in all shapes and sizes, including the sort of pomegranate shapes. We realised we'd got it, and we invested in some pheromone traps. And we went down the nematode route as well to try and we religiously applied these nematodes every couple of weeks. We ordered them, came. Colin would be out there with his gloves on, going through all of these box, literally picking the caterpillars off one by one almost. I mean, a bit of a labour of love. And it seemed to work, actually, that first year. We were quite pleased. And all fine. The second year then, we had another attack, a bit worse, and some of the hedging was affected. And we just thought, I was starting to think, I don't know, are we actually going to get on top of it? Or is it, because I think in a small space, you don't have the luxury of a larger space. We see it all of the time.
Yeah.
So, and it's because it's such a prominent feature to have it looking sort of dead almost. It's just not very pleasant. So we stuck with it again that second year. But this year we came back from being away, and oh my goodness, it had just been demolished. So the next day I was traveling for work, and I came back a couple of days later, and Colin had dug it all up, every single one. Gosh. It had all gone to the box hedging in the sky, really, and all of our pots, all of the hedging, the lot, all gone. So many years worth of work. So it was a bit heartbreaking. And we've kind of lived with it for a couple of months, just like that. And we did wonder, oh God, should we change it altogether and make it more of a gravelly type garden? But I think it was a conversation I had with you about that, just saying, oh, we're not quite sure what to do. And you were saying, oh, I would be sorry maybe to lose that structure because it's such a feature. So we decided to look for an alternative, and we spent quite a long time doing it. And in the end, we have gone for Ilex crenata. And I know not everyone agrees with that choice. I know there's some people think maybe that it doesn't like the hot summers so much, or it doesn't cope with wet winters so well. But I want to try it because for me, it's the most similar to box and how it looks. And I want to get back to that. We'll never have all the topiary back, I don't think, in pots. We'll do other things in pots. But the hedging we want. So we've bought quite a lot of it to create new hedging. And then we've bought some established kind of balls and cones so we can get back a little bit of what we lost. So I'm looking at them all now. They all sit out there in their pots on the terrace area. And in the next few weeks, they're all going to be planted out. So it's a November job.
We'll have to revisit that, won't we? Next year and just sort of check in with you to see how you feel about it. I mean, I remember when I started gardening and I was a volunteer at Great Dixter, they'd taken the box already out of their high garden there and replaced it with an aster. And I remember thinking, gosh, that's quite a shame. But actually now it's almost a feature of that garden. It was partly you, I think, that they were replacing. But anyway, I think it is an interesting subject. I mean, I have to say, I'm still hanging on to our box here because we haven't yet. We've got a little bit, but it really hasn't done bad damage. But I just hope it's not an inevitability. I know Monty Don has taken all his out. But I think that might be a really interesting subject for another podcast. So we will come back to it. Thank you so much, Tom. It was lovely to talk through that sort of first layer of plants that you want to put in your garden. And we will chat again soon.
Great.
Thanks so much for listening to Grow Cookie to Range with me and Tom Stimpson. Next week, I'm joined by Josie Lewis, our head gardener, and we're going to talk about our 12 best plants for winter containers into spring. So the things that you can actually still plant now and that will look lovely until your bulbs come in March and April. So see you then. You can find more information, photos and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.